Hey viewers, real quick, click the top link in the video description to join my mailing list. I'll have merch and a book coming out soon, so join the mailing list and I can send you updates on those things. Thank you.
I also keep the possibility open of extraterrestrials, because if there's more land that they're hiding on the, because I believe we live on some kind of a plane.
Why is that?
Well, because for one, we can see way too far. Like the world distance for photography is like 750 miles or something like that.
No, it's
So
not.
that's pretty
It's about
incredible.
400. It's like 225 miles, 445 kilometers.
Oh, is what, the mountains in France?
Yes, but it was
Oh, is that
taken from the
225?
top of another mountain. So if you're really high up on a mountain, you can see obviously much farther than if you're on the ground.
That's true. But how about when we can zoom in on boats that are way out of your vision?
Yeah, but have you ever actually watched footage of a boat that's really far zoomed in? You can watch the boat go below the horizon, even when it's zoomed in.
Yeah, until you get a better zoom.
No, that never happens. I've seen all kinds of videos like this. Also,
Hmm.
when you zoom in a boat, oh, let's see. Let's just find a picture of this.
Do you have screen sharing on here?
You can't share a phone screen. No, that's not an option.
But can you do it?
Well,
Oh, you
I'm
can.
doing this from a phone, so
Oh, you are.
no.
Okay.
But anyways, so here are some windmills, and so the way this really works is if we were zooming in, if these were just too far away to see, and we zoomed it in and we would see more, well, notice how we don't see the bottom of the windmills, but also notice
Hmm.
how there's no water behind the windmills. That only
Hmm.
makes sense if this actually is the curvature of the Earth, and so the rest of
Hmm.
the ocean is below this line here. That's the only thing that actually makes any sense.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Hmm.
Yeah.
How about the fact that we still have the same constellations from thousands of years ago and they haven't changed at all?
Why would they change? I mean, they have changed, but why would they change?
I feel like they would, because we travel about four over 4 billion miles per year, our
So do
whole
the
solar
stars.
system. So you would kind of think at some point they'd get shaken up a bit.
Yeah, but they're moving too.
So all those star systems are staying perfectly with us, you think?
It's not perfect. In fact, we can track their movement, but it's really subtle. But the whole galaxy rotates. But even if I've actually done the math on this, why don't stars? Oh shoot! Here, let me
Like, I'm
let me
talking about
find
since
this.
Greek times, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, well, they have, but here, hold on. Just give me a second here. Sorry. Um, why don't the stars? Where the heck is it? Why don't the stars change if Earth is moving so fast? There we go. So, I've done the math on this, and this is part of my
Mhm.
book. So I'll just read from a part of my book. The number we are most concerned with is the speed Earth orbits the Milky Way galaxy. The number appears to be around 200 kilometers per second. At that speed, shouldn't the stars be whizzing by? We can check with some simple geometry, or trigonometry, sorry. You probably noticed that when you're driving in a car, the telephone poles look like they're moving quickly, but the trees on the horizon look motionless. This is because the parallax angle you create by moving with something close is very large, but for something far away is very small. The closest star to us, apart from the Sun, is Proxima Centauri at around 4.25 light years. If we take the distance Earth moves in 1 minute, that will serve as the base of our triangle. So it's here we are, the star's way up here, We move this far in 1 minute. Now, what is that angle between us going to be? That's what I'm talking about. That
Mm-hmm.
the angle that will create has an angle of 0.0000000171188 degrees. That's obviously way too small to see. The smallest angular size that a human can see is about 0.02 degrees. Now, what if we allow Earth to travel for an entire year? That's only going to create an angle of 0.009 degrees, but it takes an entire year for that angle to be drawn. So obviously nobody would see that. But again,
Mm-hmm.
everything I just said there assumes that Earth is moving and the stars are stationary, but we know
Right.
that they're not. But we can also track the movement of stars.
Except Polaris, that stays right there. All the
Well,
trails are going
so
around and around and
it
around.
it does, but it doesn't. But that's because the Earth is spinning. So if Earth is spinning, there's obviously, well, there's actually two places where you're rotating, but you aren't drawing a circle. You're just rotating in place. That's the geographic north and the geographic south pole. And there is a geographic south pole, and there's also a celestial south pole, which is physically impossible with a flat Earth.
Why do
We'll
you
come
think the
back to
North
that
Pole and
later.
South Pole are so different?
But
Like in terms of,
The North Pole
you know,
star has changed. It used to be a star called Thuban, and that's because as Earth spins, it precesses like a top. It takes an extremely long time to do that. But thousands of years ago, to the Egyptians who built the pyramids, who a lot of flat earthers sort of revere, they knew that the North Star was not Polaris, it was Thuban. But thousands of years later, now Earth's geographic North Pole is now pointing towards Polaris instead. So the stars actually do change over time.
but we do have the same constellations for all of recorded human history, right?
Yeah, but there's no reason they would change because they rotate with us. But also the relative positions of those stars does change slightly. Like, for
Slightly.
example, you know how the zodiacs, they have the dates to them?
Yeah.
Those dates are off by like more than 20 days now from
Oh, really?
when that started over 2,000 years ago, because again, Earth is precessing. So the constellations are still there, but they're in completely different, they appear in the sky at completely different times of the year now than they did thousands of years ago. So like the question you have, why don't they change? They have changed quite a bit.
Just not for us to be able to see with our eyes.
No, yeah, you can see them with their eyes. That's how we know that they're different.
But you can still draw all the same constellations up there.
Yeah, but they're in different positions.
We were saying that the shapes are in different positions as they were.
The stars appear in the sky at completely different times of the year because the Earth is processing as it
Mm-hmm.
over the millennia. The stars themselves are pretty much in the same places, but again, the whole galaxy
Mm-hmm.
is rotating, and these things are light years away. So even if one of these stars moved 1 billion miles from where we are, that would be almost totally unnoticeable.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that the South and the North Pole are so different as far as climate and like species and plants and animals that are there?
As far as the climate, the South Pole is a continent. The North Pole is not. As far as species, the geographic distribution of species, this has been known for hundreds and hundreds of years that each place has its own species. Like for
But
example,
there's so many more in the North Pole.
Madagascar is famous because so few because the animals that live there live nowhere else. There are so many more animals in the North Pole.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure wait, like what?
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of plants and animals that are there because they have a summer season, like a 24-hour sun, you know? And the South Pole,
So does the South Pole, but the North
I
Pole,
don't believe
there's
that's
no
ever been
land at the.
filmed though.
What do you mean just like above the Arctic Circle, or what do you mean by the North Pole? Because Alaska is not the North Pole.
Yeah, I mean in the Arctic Circle. Yeah.
Okay. So what kinds of plants and animals live above the Arctic Circle? I'm aware
Like it
of
gets
polar
hot. It gets
bears.
hot.
Sorry, go ahead.
It gets hot enough to melt ice up there. You know, in the summer.
So, yeah, Antarctica is a continent. So, the ocean,
Mhm.
uh, being next to a body of water has enormous effects on the climate, and the South Pole is landlocked,
Right.
whereas the North Pole is not. So, like, funny enough, in Anchorage, Alaska, that's one of our most, it's our northernmost large city in America. uh,
Hmm.
it doesn't get below freezing very often there, and we think that's weird, but that's because it's next to the ocean, and because the ocean, uh, like there will be ice on the ocean, but the ocean never actually freezes, which means the ocean stays above freezing pretty much all the time,
Hmm.
and the heat that radiates off of the ocean moves over to land, and the land stays warmer. So because the Arctic region is mostly water, not land, that has an enormous effect. The South Pole, Antarctica, is a continent, so it's landlocked. So the temperature extremes are way more. I'm
Hmm.
originally from South Dakota, right in the middle of the country, and it gets down to like negative 60 degrees, right? Uh, because we're landlocked, right?
Hmm.
The Mongolian desert, famously, like it can get very hot there, but it can also get unbearably cold because it's landlocked.
Do you feel like Do you feel like the moon missions from the '60s were real?
Yeah, but I don't really care if they weren't real. I mean, I just
Uh,
care about science. And I guess that does have
uh,
implications for science, but it doesn't have any implication for the shape of the Earth. We don't need to go to space to prove the shape of the Earth.
it's just crazy because the speeds and the movements that they claim of the Earth is just nuts, man. I mean, I've never felt anything close to what these motions are being claimed. You know,
What?
like I
I don't
rely
know
on
what
my
you. I don't know
senses.
what you. I don't know what you mean.
I've never felt the Earth move at all, except in an earthquake.
Have you ever? When you were when
I
I was
think you would
younger,
feel it.
I slept in the car all the time. Right? Did you?
No,
Have you ever slept in a car though?
a moving car? Yeah,
Have you ever been on a plane?
yeah.
Have you ever slept on a plane?
Hmm.
So you're telling me you can sleep while you're going 500 miles per hour?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that there's no container on the Earth. So,
Okay, so there doesn't need to be, but that's not really relevant because the
well,
thing
kind of
is,
because
going
it's a
500
positive
miles
pressure
per
shift.
hour doesn't, or even 1,000 miles per hour doesn't matter if your speed is constant because zero is a constant speed. When I sleep in my bed, it
Uh-huh.
doesn't move, so it's easy to fall asleep because it's going at a constant speed. If I'm going 500 miles per hour, as long as it's still a constant speed, that feels the same as moving 0 miles per hour. So when you say Earth can't be moving because I would feel it,
Hmm.
no, not if you're going at a constant speed. We both know that.
And how do you feel about having an atmosphere like a positive pressure system and a vacuum of space right next to each other? How does that work, you think?
Gravity.
So that you don't need any kind of barrier, I mean, how would that not?
Because gravity holds the atmosphere down. If the Earth were so, have you ever blown up a balloon and noticed that the left side of the balloon doesn't have any air in it, but the right side of the balloon does?
Not really, no.
Right. That was a trick question because that's impossible. Because if you put gas in a container, and if the force of gravity is just negligent, obviously the force of gravity according to us, is always around. But on a scale the size of a balloon, it doesn't matter, right? When you put gas in a container and gravity isn't a factor, the gas will always fill up the container uniformly. Now, you and I both know that the atmosphere gets thinner as you go up. That's why weather balloons pop, because they go into low pressure and the balloon expands and eventually pop. We know that, like, even if you don't think we've ever been to space, you and I both know that we've been many, many, many dozens of miles up there, and we know that the atmosphere is way less than 1% as thick when you go like 100 miles up. Well, if it's getting thinner, why would we not think that eventually it gets to a point where there is no atmosphere? And then the other problem is, if it were in a container and there was no gravity, the pressure would be the same everywhere. Just like you can't have the left side of a balloon have no air in it and the right side of the balloon have air in it.
So gravity is so strong that it can hold an entire atmosphere to an Earth and quadrillions of gallons of water to a spinning ball, but it
Well,
can't
the
stop
atmospheric
a little
pressure
fly from
actually
flying away.
keeps the oceans where they are.
But it can't stop a little butterfly
Yes, it can.
from flying.
What happens the moment the butterfly stops flapping its wings?
Yeah, but I'm saying it's not that strong of a force, is what I'm saying.
It's actually not that strong of a force, but what
No.
happens the moment the butterfly stops flapping its wings?
It goes down because down is down and up is up. There is an up and down, objectively.
No, there isn't. But it
I
falls
believe there is.
because of gravity. Um,
I think it falls because it's
so
not generating any more motion upwards.
yeah, it has to produce, it has to exert energy or produce, I guess, a thrust in the opposite. It has to accelerate in the opposite direction of the downward acceleration of gravity. And once it stops doing that, the downward acceleration is always there. Like a helicopter, once a helicopter starts, producing lift, why doesn't it just keep going up and up forever? Because there's a constant downward acceleration acting on it.
But can't you just explain that with electrostatic force?
No,
I mean, it's admitted that electrostatic force is like 10 to the 30th power stronger than the force of gravity.
it really isn't, and that statement actually doesn't make any sense.
That's what
Because,
science says. That's what the textbooks say.
so it's true that the electrostatic force between two protons, which are positively charged, is 10 to the 36 power stronger than the gravitational force that they feel. But
Mhm.
if I take two neutrons,
Mhm.
how do you think the gravitational force between them compares to the electrostatic force between them?
I don't think you even need gravity because I think it can be described by density and buoyancy. You know,
So,
I don't believe you even need
to
gravity
answer
for
the
that.
question, the gravitational force is actually infinitely stronger than the electrostatic force between those two things. So
But the
I
Earth
can
isn't.
frame this and say that gravity is infinitely stronger than electrostatics.
But you know, like grounding, like the Earth is grounded. It's grounded.
It's not.
You know,
I
that's
don't
what
I
the
have
ground
literally
is.
no idea what that means.
Like the Earth has a negative charge to it.
But it doesn't.
That's why
If
Van
that were
Graaff
true, then
generators work.
things that are negatively charged would float, and they don't.
Well, you've seen a Van Graaff generator with a balloon, right?
Yeah.
So that's just manipulating the balloon with positive and negative charges. You don't even need, you know, gravity.
What is yeah, but you, well, you do, but what would that even prove?
I'm saying, how is gravity a selective force? You know, that doesn't really make sense to me.
It's not selective. It's universal.
But it has to be pretty damn strong to hold down all this water to a spinning ball, you know,
It's
wouldn't
really
it?
not the gravity. There's two things. Gravity is a weak force, which is why, a fridge magnet can overcome the force of gravity. But the Earth is so massive that it has a an enormous gravitational field. But also, the oceans are kept in place by atmospheric pressure. If we didn't have an atmosphere, all of the water on Earth would just turn into a gas.
So you're saying you could
You
have
can
a whole
test that by
atmosphere.
taking one of those big plastic syringes, put hot water in it, but not hot enough to boil. Plug the end, pull the plunger back, and the water inside will boil because low pressure turns water into a gas.
So you're saying you could have a whole atmosphere that's not getting sucked into the greatest vacuum in the universe, which is the universe itself, without any kind of container?
Yeah, we already went over that. You know that the atmosphere gets
I
thinner
don't
as you go
understand that.
up.
But it's still a whole atmosphere. I mean, it's still a positive pressure system, next to a negative pressure, next to a
So
vacuum,
there's no such
you
thing
know.
as negative pressure because suction isn't a force. There's only positive pressure.
Well, it's a vacuum. I
Yeah,
mean,
but vacuums don't produce a force.
but they suck.
They don't though. Oh, the positive pressure will push things towards where there's like a low concentration, but like vacuum and negative pressure, those don't exist. If you put a suction cup against a wall, there isn't a force inside the suction cup holding it to the wall. It's the positive pressure outside of it that's pressing it into the wall. But again,
So you don't
you
believe
know for
I
a
mean,
fact that the atmosphere gets thinner as you go up. And the atmosphere, I even if you don't think we've been to space, you know that we've been many miles up in the atmosphere where the pressure is 100 or 1,000 times thinner than it is here on the
mhm.
ground. So what would stop that's not possible if Earth's atmosphere is in a container and there is no gravity. But
That's why I believe there is
what's to
some kind of
stop it from
container.
getting to zero pressure? Why can it get to 1/1000th of a pressure and not zero?
Have you seen videos of non-fisheye lenses from balloons that go up to about 300 to about 73 miles?
Yeah.
It looks completely flat.
I've seen those kinds of videos where you can see the curvature, but that's not what we were talking about. I was asking why is it that the atmosphere can get 1,000 times thinner than it is here on the ground, but not to the point where there's literally no pressure at all? Why is one of those possible and the other isn't?
I think to have any kind of air next to a vacuum, which is space, you would still have to have a container, or else it would just get sucked
But
into space.
but
So,
the air would go towards a partial vacuum also. When you open a soda can, the air rushes out because the pressure is greater inside the can than where we are. So if the atmosphere is 1,000 times thinner, several miles up, then what the air should be doing is flying upward in order to equalize in pressure, but it doesn't do that. I mean, your
because
argument
there's
is
a
just
container on it.
no, but even
Because there's
it
a
doesn't
container on
matter
Earth, I believe.
whether or not there is a container.
Hmm.
This whole thing about the pressure equalizing, it will equalize not just to a vacuum, but to a partial vacuum. So why
That's
doesn't the
fine.
air here on the ground fly upwards in order to balance out the thin air that's up there? The
Because this
reason
is
it
how the
doesn't
Earth
is
was created.
because
Because this is how
gravity
the Earth
holds
was
it down. But
created.
I'm sorry. The reason it doesn't is because of gravity that holds it down. But I'm wondering what your answer is.
Because this is how it was created.
That's not an answer.
Of course it is.
No. Well, it's not a
Something
good
created the
answer.
Earth.
It relies on no evidence, and it's really just a cop out.
No, because there's certain things you just don't know. Like what happens after you die, you just don't know that.
Yeah, but we do. Yeah, but like the idea of gravity is like we know that it's been scientifically tested
It
so
can
many
all be
times,
explained by density and buoyancy, though.
but it can't be.
That there's an up and a down. There's an inherent objective up and down.
But there isn't. Why is the atmosphere less dense 10 miles up than on the ground? That's not how density works.
Well, you don't have an answer for why that is exactly, I still
No, I
believe
do.
that
You
it
don't.
would have to. Well, to me, it doesn't really matter because it's still all the air of the earth that's up there. There's so much air up there, and there's still a pressure system up there. Okay, so if there was really a vacuum there, then it would just be sucking it all up, you know?
That's
Nothing
also
would be
true.
contained.
That's also true if there was a partial vacuum. So why doesn't the air get all sucked up towards the partial vacuum?
Well, I don't even believe there's a vacuum there. I'm just saying what you guys believe. I don't even believe
You're
that,
either
you know?
you're either
I don't
ignoring
believe
me,
that.
you're either ignoring me or you're not paying any attention. The thing you're saying would happen to a vacuum would also happen to a partial vacuum. So why isn't the air, even if you don't think there's space, but you know for a fact there's a partial vacuum many miles above us. So why isn't the air rushing up towards the partial vacuum?
Because I don't believe there's a partial vacuum. I don't believe there's any kind of vacuum, honestly. I was just saying that
We
from the,
know, no,
the
you
geocentric
do believe
angle, you
that.
know?
You know for a fact that the air is
Heliocentric.
thinner in Denver, Colorado than it is in Death Valley. You know that
But why is that?
because of gravity.
See, that's not acceptable to me.
But you don't have an
That's not an
alternative
acceptable answer because I
explanation.
don't even believe in gravity. I say that
I,
that's just
I,
how this earth was created,
yeah,
you
but the
know?
thing you believe in is wholly incapable of describing what we're talking about, and the thing I believe in is.
Not really because gravity is just a theory, you know?
Yeah, a scientific theory can't become a scientific theory until it's been proven experimentally
It's
or
not a fact
observationally or
of
both.
gravity.
But
Like
it
things
is
don't just
because it's a
fall and rise
scientific
because of gravity, you
it's
know?
it is a fact because it's a theory. That's how scientific theories work. Do you think that atoms exist?
I do because we can see them.
No, you
We can
can't.
measure them, we can
Atoms are
quantify them.
smaller than wavelengths of light. So you can't see them. But we know that atoms exist and that they're composed of protons, neutrons, and electrons,
We
even
can see the
though
things around them.
it's called atomic theory. It's literally called atomic theory.
I mean, I'm not so sure. I really haven't looked too much into atoms to tell you the truth, but
Do you think that E.
I could,
coli causes food poisoning?
I'm not sure.
Okay. That's called that's part of what we call the germ theory of disease.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that one at all.
You don't think that germs cause diseases?
No.
Interesting.
I
So
don't
what do
think
you want to
so.
talk about next?
I'll tell you though, you have a lot of great points. You do.
Yeah. Well, the truth is often like that.
See, for me, I just have a hard time believing anything that any kind of authority tells us because we've been so screwed over the past few years, and
Do you
there's
believe in
just so
God?
much suffering in the world, you know?
Do you believe in God?
Absolutely, yeah.
Would you call God an authority?
I would, yeah.
So why do you choose to believe this authority but not others?
Because I don't believe in men and man authority, you know, another man. I'm not just going to take his word to inject this in me or this is where you live or, you know, anything like that. Just because it's another
Do you
man,
know
I'm
who
not
wrote
going
the
to.
Bible?
But I have nothing to do with religion. Just because I believe in a creator and a higher power, I'm not saying I believe in any kind of religion, you know, organized religion. So those are
But you
completely
believe
different
in
things.
do you consider yourself a Christian?
No,
Okay. Well, you know what? Fair enough. So we won't focus on that then.
no. I mean, it's just that the men and women of this earth have just screwed us over so badly over the past however long. And
I
I just have
agree.
a really hard
I agree,
time
but there are also
believing a lot of
plenty
this
of
stuff.
heroes too.
Yeah, but there's so many lies, and let's just talk about government, you know? I mean, these people are a piece of work, man. They're destroying my entire city of Los Angeles and state of California, you know? They are just absolutely destroying it. And people like my own family, they just keep voting for these people over and over. And we have hundreds of thousands of homeless people suffering and dying on the street. And you got the politicians who were, I guess, fairly elected. They're just they're pocketing millions of dollars off of them, you know? So it's just so horrible. It's like, why would I believe these liars? You know, they're the ones who locked me in my house, you know, for a year and
Well,
closed everyone's businesses down,
I don't
you
get any
know?
of my scientific information from the government.
Well, they locked us down, man. They closed everyone's businesses, you know?
Yeah, I don't get any of my scientific information from the government.
I hear you, but I mean, they're the enemy, you know, in my opinion. They're the absolute enemy. So I would, and you're saying not from the government, but you know, who are they listening to? The science, right? That's what they say. They're listening to the science. So someone who's giving your information is in cahoots with someone, you know?
Well, I mean that's how anything would have to work, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That's why we need to change this stuff. And we have to stop voting for these same idiots over and over, you know, or just don't vote at all, even better, you know? That would be the best thing to just not vote at all because the whole thing's probably rigged anyway. Would you really trust them with anything, you know? Because science and government have kind of, they're trying to
If you
merge a
don't
little bit, you
vote,
know?
if you don't vote, that doesn't mean that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights no longer apply. They would still hold office.
Yeah, but it would send them a message, you know?
No,
I
because we
think.
used to this country is technically a republic, and when this country was founded, a very small percentage of people got to vote, and they would be a okay with the fewest number of people they can voting because that would be like their corporate oligarchs and stuff like that, which is on both sides of the political aisle. That's kind of already the way it works. If you want any kind of policy to actually follow through, it needs to be backed by a donor for the most part. But so no, I mean they would absolutely love it. And the Republican Party especially is actively trying to do this. I mean they've actively been trying to get as few people to vote as possible, because they know that they have no ideas that are even remotely palatable to anybody, except for except for you know people who I guess millionaires and billionaires for the most part, but also really creepy people with like how would you say fascist theocracy fantasies. So
So, but what would you do if you had two people that were corrupt that you knew were not good for your area? Would you just always take the lesser of two evils? See, I'm not into that, you know?
individually, I can see myself abstaining from a vote because the options are terrible. But
Yeah.
if everybody does that, then our democracy collapses. I
I
mean,
guess that
I
that might
think
not be a bad thing though, you know?
for it to collapse, no, I think like science,
Might not
like
be
as
a
a science advocate, science has created some pretty bad problems for the world, but it's always better science that fixes them and the scientific method that detects these problems. And I think the only really good solution for the problems that democracy has given us is better democracy. And I'm perpetually frustrated with the rate of progress and the rate of change. But, you know, the United States Constitution has been amended 25 times. It's really hard for me to imagine it being amended ever again, but maybe. It was precisely the government that initially said no, women and certain people you're not going to vote, and then they're also the ones that allowed that to happen. They are the ones that started prohibition. This is like one of these things where like you can't give them power or they'll never give it back. Well, they started prohibition and ended prohibition, and it didn't require a lot of really bad stuff happened throughout
Mhm.
prohibition, but it didn't require like an actual civil war or anything like that. So I think I think that I just don't believe in burning down the system. That's just me. But typically, this is an interesting conversation. But typically, we try to just talk about science here because certain
Mm-hmm.
people, like, when we're watching sports, you don't want to hear about politics. With me, when we do science, we typically
Mm-hmm.
don't like to do politics. So I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
change the subject if that's okay with you. But if you ran out of things you wanted to talk about, then that's fine too.
Well, I was just trying to, I didn't want to talk about politics. I was just trying to make the point that it's the same, it's hard to separate the people who, you know, plunge these tyrannical mandates onto us